To learn more about the allegations against the girlfriend of a Boston police officer who was found unresponsive in the snow Saturday morning, I-Team sources say Karen Reed was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. She's facing charges including motor vehicle homicide and manslaughter.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did. You will learn that it was no accident that John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road. You will learn that at that address lived a well-known and well-connected law enforcement family in Canton, the Alberts. Because the Alberts were involved, and because they had close connections to the investigators in this case, Karen Reed was framed for a murder she did not commit.
We know who did it. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know. I tried to save his life. I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life.
You knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today, we're diving into one of the most disturbing cases I've ever followed. The case of Karen Reed, a woman who's being framed for murder by the very people who should be investigating it. Corrupt police officers. And make no mistake, the evidence that cops killed John O'Keefe and pinned it on Karen is overwhelming. This case shows exactly what happens when the system protects itself. Evidence was destroyed. Evidence was manufactured. Investigators, prosecutors, the lead detective, even the judge, all tangled up in nepotism and self-preservation. This isn't justice, it's a cover-up. Now here's the part they don't want you to hear. John O'Keefe was a cop, but he wasn't one of them. He was not in their inner circle. He wasn't accepted. According to reports, he had called out bad police behavior in the past, which breaks the sacred thin blue line code. That alone was enough to put a target on his back. And his so-called friends that he was hanging out with, officers Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, two key figures in this case. They didn't even go to his funeral. Think about that. Their fellow officer is dead, found on Brian Albert's own front yard, and they couldn't be bothered to go to his funeral. But now in court, they sit there pretending to be heartbroken, pretending they cared. It's a performance, and it is damage control. Meanwhile, Brian Higgins was trying to steal Karen Reed from John O'Keefe behind his back. Add to that a night of heavy drinking, a house full of off-duty cops with violent tendencies, and you've got a dangerous mix of ego, jealousy, and rage. That's the motive they don't want to talk about, but it's at the center of this tragedy. Karen Reed already survived one trial, and the jury saw through the lies. But instead of letting her go, the judge declared a mistrial, giving the prosecution a second chance to twist the truth. Now she's facing a second trial, another multi-million-dollar fight for her life, and another round of being dragged through hell. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, but because it's so exhaustive with so much information, I've been procrastinating. But with the retrial coming, now is the time. This is about power, lies, and the system eating one of its own to survive. We're going to break down the cover-up, the red flags, and the undeniable evidence that Karen Reed is innocent and that the real criminals are hiding behind the badges and the bench. On the night of January 28, 2022, John O'Keefe and Karen Reed visited two bars in Canton, Massachusetts, C.F. McCarthy's and Waterfall Bar and Grill. At the Waterfall Bar and Grill, they met with acquaintances, including fellow police officers Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. It's important to note that Karen Reed and John O'Keefe were getting along just fine that night. Shortly after midnight, Brian Albert invited the group back to his home on 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. And very oddly, Brian Higgins sent John O'Keefe a text message and invited him there. And that was very odd because Brian Higgins had never been that close with John O'Keefe before and had never invited him anywhere before that night. At 12:24 a.m. on January 29th, 2022, Karen Reed pulled up to 34 Fairview Road and dropped off her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. She waited outside in her car and called him multiple times, but he never answered. Meanwhile, data from John's Apple Health app shows he got out of his car, walked to the house, went through the door, and descended down into the basement. Karen waited about 6 minutes before driving off. At 12:36 a.m., her phone connected to John's home Wi-Fi. Solid proof that she went back to his house at that time. That drive takes at least 6 minutes in good weather, and on this night the conditions were terrible. Snow, ice, and a blizzard. Low visibility. Here's where the time gets critical. At 12:32 a.m., 4 minutes before her phone connected to the Wi-Fi, John's phone was moved from inside the house to the front yard, right near the curb where his body would later be found. His body would be brought out later and placed in the same exact spot. And then there's the snowplow driver, Lucky. He passed by multiple times, cleaning the streets after Karen Reed had already left. He testified that he didn't see a body in the yard during any of his passes. Lucky has also proven to have somewhat of a photogenic memory. After Karen got home, she went to sleep for a little bit. When she woke up, John still hadn't returned or called. She started calling her friends and looking for John, trying to figure out where he went, not knowing the storm that she was about to walk into.
When you made that first pass by that residence at 2:45 in the morning, sir, with your headlights on, what, if anything, did you see on the front lawn in the area of the flagpole?
I saw nothing.
If there had been a 6'2", 200-pound man lying in the snow there, would you have seen it?
Yes.
Karen Reed tried to call John O'Keefe over 50 times and left numerous voicemails looking for him, also calling her friends repeatedly, trying to get information or find John O'Keefe, with no success.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit Amy. I need to go home.
She leaves him 8 voicemails.
You are too busy right now. Another girl living next to me. You're a loser. Yourself. John, I'm done with your kid. Nobody knows what the you want. Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your niece and nephew.
Can't believe it's sounding good.
Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm calling because my friend's boyfriend did not come home last night. They were at Waterfall, and now she is calling me hysterical because she doesn't know where he is. You didn't pick anybody up by the name of John O'Keefe, did you?
John O'Keefe?
Yeah, he's a Boston cop.
No, we didn't lock anybody up or anything like that.
After Karen Reed left Brian Albert's house, she drove back to John O'Keefe's home. Her Ring camera caught her backing into John's car, cracking her taillight. She then parked, went inside, and fell asleep, thinking John would be home soon. But when she woke up around 5:06 a.m., he still wasn't there. That's when the panic set in. Karen called her friend Carrie Roberts, asking if she had seen or heard from John. Carrie said no. At 5:29 a.m., Karen called Jennifer McCabe with the same questions. Jen said she didn't know where John was either. Worried and frantic, Karen Reed got back in her SUV, picked up both Carrie and Jennifer McCabe, and the three of them drove back to 34 Fairview, Brian Albert's house. Around 6 a.m., they found John O'Keefe lying in the front yard near the street. Karen tried to perform CPR and resuscitate John, and no one else helped her. But it was too late. John was already gone. That's when Jennifer McCabe called 911.
911, what's your emergency?
I need someone to come immediately to 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Mass.
What's going on?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow. I just pulled up and found him. I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey, I know. So, Carrie, you got to get off him, honey. Carrie, you got to get off of him.
Is there any bleeding or anything? Maybe hit his head out?
Yes, possibly. There seems to be bleeding in the face.
Okay, bleeding from the face. All right.
One of the women is doing CPR. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Just give us a call back if he becomes responsive, right? But we're on the way.
After paramedics arrived, John O'Keefe was found with multiple and 2 black eyes. He also had cuts and abrasions on his arm that looked like they came from an animal attack. Then came what can only be described as a clown show of an investigation. The Canton police showed up and started collecting what they thought was blood-stained snow using red Solo cups borrowed from a neighbor. They used a leaf blower to clear snow, hoping to find evidence. But they found nothing. No broken glass, no taillight fragments, nothing. And they didn't even go inside the Albert house, despite John's body being found right in the front yard. None of the investigators bothered to check the Ring doorbell cameras from homes across the street, even though those cameras were owned by a fellow cop. When the defense finally looked into it, they were told there was no footage of the incident. How convenient. Brian Albert, a trained first responder, never came outside the entire time police and paramedics were in his front yard. Meanwhile, his buddy, Brian Higgins, who had been drinking all night, left and drove to the Canton Police Department where he had an office. He had no business being there at that hour, except to gather intel and report back to Brian Albert. Phone records show several calls were made between the two, which both men claimed did not happen. When confronted about these calls with evidence, they said it must have been butt dials. Funny, these butt dials didn't even go to voicemail, and they were answered. Very suspicious. Due to the close relationship between the Canton police and the Albert family, the Canton Police Department recused itself. The Massachusetts State Police took over and handed the case to Trooper Michael Proctor, a known friend of the Albert family. Once Proctor was in charge, he seized Karen Reed's SUV. Only after her SUV was seized, pieces of her taillight conveniently began showing up in the Albert front yard where John O'Keefe's body was found. Then it got even more shady. Proctor's text messages revealed a clear bias. He bragged that the Alberts wouldn't face any heat because Brian Albert was a Boston cop. Early on in the investigation, long before any solid evidence was gathered, he wrote that Karen Reed was quote-unquote fucked. On February 1st, 2022, Karen Reed was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident. According to Trooper Proctor in the Commonwealth, Karen supposedly put her SUV in reverse and struck John O'Keefe, killing him and causing all of his injuries. They claim her taillight shattered on impact, and the flying plastic somehow caused all the deep lacerations on his arm that, let's not forget, looks more like an animal attack. From that point on, Karen Reed was in the fight of her life, with the deck stacked against her. Proctor in the Commonwealth built a case designed to protect Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and the thin blue line that shield cops from accountability. Julie Albert even texted Michael Proctor, saying she wanted to buy him a gift for doing a great job on the investigation. It didn't stop there. Text messages revealed that Judge Beverly Cannoni, who's overseeing the case, also has friendly ties to the Albert family. She refused to recuse herself, and she blocked a key evidentiary hearing that would have allowed the defense to dig deeper into the McCabe's, another family closely tied to this incident. The defense's theory is simple. John O'Keefe went into the Albert home where he was assaulted and attacked by an animal. After he died, his body was moved through a cellar door and dragged out to the front yard, where it was staged to look like a hit and run.
Had an officer, Boston police officer, who was either dead or dying on the front lawn of a house with a bunch of occupants, and you didn't think that it was necessary to investigate or interview those occupants yourself?
No, I did not.
Did you look around the house for any sign of a struggle or a fight?
No.
Did you go to the basement at all? No. Did you personally observe whether or not that house has a bulkhead door that services the basement?
I have no idea.
Inside the house, did you photograph any part of the house?
No.
While you were on scene at 34 Fairview for an hour and 40 minutes, and you wrote a report regarding this, correct?
I did.
How many pieces of taillight did you find on or around that property?
That morning, none.
I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight.
You know approximately how many pieces of that were able to locate on that day?
I believe maybe 6 or 7 pieces.
He owns a dog. We have specific evidence. Talk about specificity. Specific evidence from one of the country's leading pathologists indicating that John O'Keefe's arm was mauled by a dog. Brian Albert's dog was a 90-pound German Shepherd. Oh, and by the way, Brian Albert made sure to get rid of that dog in the months following John O'Keefe's death, after that dog had literally been with the family for some 7 or 8 years. Is the injury to the head that you saw consistent with having been struck by a vehicle?
It is not, no, sir. To get the injury, it was a fracture at the occipital region of the head, which is basically on the back bottom part of the head. So in order to have that part of the head contacted by the taillight, you would somehow have to have a configuration or be standing in a manner that the rest of your body doesn't get hit, because there's no other significant injuries to the body. So the fact that we only have that head injury and only damage to the occipital portion of the skull is inconsistent in this case with being struck by that taillight.
What is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those injuries appear to be consistent with an animal attack. Well, they are consistent with a large dog attack. There's a combination of both what I consider bite wounds and scratch wounds on the arm. There were also some puncture wounds in that shirt.
Ms. Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
I did not get rid of my dog, I rehomed my dog.
Not only did they get rid of their dog Chloe that they had had for 7 years, but they also sold their home that had been in their family for decades, and they sold it way below the market value.
Did you, in fact, use a phrase to Google search how long it takes for someone to die of extreme temperatures?
I did in the morning at the request of your client.
You see this first search that says "Hostile to die in cold"?
I do.
What's that time?
2:27 a.m.
Ms. McCabe, you made that search at 2:27 a.m. because you knew that John O'Keefe was outside in your sister's lawn dying in the cold, didn't you?
Absolutely not.
Ms. McCabe, the reason you deleted that 2:27 a.m. call is because you realized that if you were caught Googling how long it takes for a person to die in the cold 3.5 hours before John's body was found, that would incriminate you, wouldn't it?
And what does he say in that text?
I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some.
And what is it that you respond?
My first response was nope. Homeowner is a Boston cop too.
What, if anything, were you saying, or what was the purpose of that text in regard to the homeowner?
I was just letting him know that essentially Mr. O'Keefe is a Boston cop and the homeowner was a Boston cop as well.
You knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was 0 chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's
0 chance she skates. She's right?
Correct.
17 hours into this investigation, Trooper Proctor, you made the decision that you were going to put it on Miss Reed, didn't you? Put the case on Miss Reed. She was going to catch the case, correct? What you meant by that comment, Trooper Proctor, was I am going to make sure Ms. Reed doesn't skate.
Trooper Michael Proctor showed pieces from the taillight of Karen Reed's SUV, which he says he first noticed when he saw it outside Reed's parents' home following John O'Keefe's death.
The right rear taillight had such large pieces missing from it.
The defense says Proctor broke the taillight after the SUV was seized as evidence and brought to the Canton Police Department. Proctor denied that.
Sergeant Mechanic and I never touched any part of that vehicle.
Proctor says he never made any decisions about the case on his own, and that he conducted nearly all of the interviews with other officers present. Another investigator, Sergeant Yuri Buchenek, was again grilled about video of Reed's SUV at the Canton Police Department. The video was originally shown to the jury horizontally inverted.
Do you believe that what the jurors are seeing right here is a true and accurate surveillance footage of the Sally Port that night?
Yes, it's just mirrored.
Defense attorney Alan Jackson said about 2/3 of the mirrored video is missing, and that people in the video seem to appear out of nowhere.
Another thing that needs to be pointed out, the Canton Library is in between Brian Albert's home and John O'Keefe's home. They have a camera that records traffic that goes by. Well, the video footage from 12:30 to 12:36 is missing, and that is the time slot that Karen Reed would have drove by the library. Now, why is that significant? Well, because if they had the video, that would have shown whether or not her taillight was broken or not. But that's just another piece to the puzzle that doesn't make sense and makes this look like she was framed and this was a cover-up.
So now we have the lead investigator from Massachusetts State Police literally discussing the exchange of gifts between the Albert family on the one hand and the Proctor family on the other hand as a thank you, their words, for helping the Alberts out of a jam. And if you looked up quid pro quo in the dictionary, you would find this set of text messages. Any one of these examples, and I didn't touch on all of them, but any one of these examples, the gift giving, the babysitting, the telephone extraction, the Google search at 2:27 in the morning, all of these, any one of these would be enough to dismiss the charges as they sit here today. But the cumulative effect of this deception and all of it, this distortion in front of the grand jury, is too much for the court to ignore. The simple fact, Your Honor, is the presentation before by the Commonwealth before the grand jury in the state court action, it just wasn't fair. That's the easiest way to say it. It just didn't give Miss Reed a fair shot. It just didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a cover-up in this case, plain and simple. What evidence do they actually have to prove that that SUV ever hit John? The answer is none, and John's injuries did not come from being hit by a car. So how are those injuries properly explained? The evidence is simple. John got into an altercation. He got hit and he fell to the ground, fracturing his skull. At some point during that altercation, the dog got a hold of him. Every single injury is explained by that. Given what we know about the facts and the physical evidence in this case, the actual truth in this case, how did this happen? How did we end up here? We ended up here because of relationships and building a tall blue wall.
On June 25th, 2024, the case went to the jury. After 5 days of deliberation, they returned a verdict of not guilty on murder, not guilty on leaving the scene of an accident. However, they were deadlocked on the charge of manslaughter, resulting in a hung jury. Instead of honoring the not guilty verdicts and declaring a partial mistrial on the one unresolved charge, Judge Beverly Canoni, who has shown clear bias throughout the trial, rushed to declare a mistrial on all 3 counts. She failed to properly poll the jury and gave unclear instructions, contributing to the confusion. It was a blatant miscarriage of justice, and it speaks volumes about the level of corruption surrounding this case. Judge Canoni refused to recuse herself despite serious conflicts of interest during this case. She sided with the prosecution at nearly every turn. In many ways, it felt like Karen Reed was fighting 2 prosecutors, one at the table and one wearing the robe. Let's be honest, this case was never about justice. It's about power, control, and protecting their own. Michael Morrissey and the Norfolk County DA's office have made it clear. They are willing to do whatever it takes to bury the truth and railroad Karen Reed. This video only scratches the surface. There are countless red flags that point to Karen Reed's innocence and the cover-up surrounding John O'Keefe's death. Honestly, the amount of information surrounding this case is overwhelming. But staying silent wasn't an option. I had to speak out and make this video. If you want to help Karen Reed in her fight, check the description below. I've included links to her defense fund because this is a multi-million-dollar defense legal battle, and they're making her go through it all over again because a corrupt judge saw no other way to keep the cover-up alive. And right now, as we speak, her second trial is gearing up and getting started. I'll be covering it right here on this channel. Stay tuned, stay alert, and keep sharing the truth.
I'm declaring a mistrial in this case.
I'm not from Texas like my colleagues here. I'm a Boston kid, but I'll repeat what he said, which is, we ain't got no quit.